Well, good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. I see some people on the moon also. Welcome. Just send our regards to Elon Musk. Telling me you mustn't forget he's a South African. Or he was, actually. He was a South African. He was born and raised here. Well, I'm happy to see everybody, and I'm happy that you endured to stay until the end of this training. Level 1 is always interesting. I love level 1. It's probably level 2 is good. I just presented the level 2 over the weekend at the Bikers Church. Some of their people are also on here. They are continuing their studies. But any case, it was quite an exciting course. We always start with the 5 fears of intimacy. It's quite good to know what you're fearing. So, because what you're fearing ultimately makes your decisions for you. It's like you giving your control completely away to somebody else when you fear that specific situation. Remember, when you fear something, it can be a perceived fear or it can be a real threat. You know, it can happen, it can play out. But you as chaplains, you've got a mammoth task, and you've got a great big task because you are volunteering for a service. And as you drive to the crisis, you don't know what you're going to find there. And that's the challenge. You know, you're going to find something you don't want to see. You're going to hear things you don't want to hear. You're going to be involved in a situation where you never thought you're going to be involved with. Now, that is also the same for ministers of faith and of religion. And we are all ministers in a certain sense. Now, I want to just open this proceedings tonight and read from the book of Titus 1 for you. So he says in verse 6, in chapter 1, namely, if any man is above reproach, the husband of one wife, having children who believe, not accused of dissipation, not stomach dissipation, or rebellion, for the overseer, and that's us, the one who's in a ministerial position. The overseer must be above reproach as God's steward, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, not pugnacious, not fond of sordid gain, but hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, just, devout, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word, which is in accordance with the teaching, so that he will be able both to exhort in sound doctrine and to refute those who contradict. So this actually is speaking not only to pastors, but he's also speaking to clergy people like yourself, because you are also in a typical cloaky situation. Remember our course session about history of chaplaincy, and I told you that we are all, wearing the cloak of capellanus, which is the Latin word for chaplain. We are wearing the cloak because we chose to do that. And chaplaincy is all about sharing and caring and devoting yourself. And go and read on your own time if you don't mind. Titus 1, because I just want to start with this class because we still have some. We've got a long way to go tonight. We've got 3 sessions to cover. Otherwise, we're gonna run into troubles next week when we want to finish up our course. So yes, you can go and read chapters 1 from verse 5, and then you can see all of the qualifications. You can also study some 1 Timothy, especially verse chapter 2 and so on. But go for Titus 1 at least before you go to bed tonight. So yes, let's pray. Father, thank you for this moment where we can share and care for one another. What does it help? We do not care for one another. How would we care for other people? How would we care for the flock of God? How would we care for the sinners outside? Our prayer is in the name of Jesus, Lord, that you will encourage our hearts tonight, that we will find refuge in you. And if somebody is on this platform today, aching, with heart pain, with whatever situation they are facing, Lord, that they will remember you're always around. You're in us, you're about us, you're all over. And we thank you in the precious name of Jesus. Help us to help others, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, very well. There we go. So I hope you did your homework, which I gave you last week. No, it's Tuesday. I'm sorry. I'm already in Monday. So I gave you some homework to do, and also you'll be getting homework before this weekend. I'll be sharing with you some video material. You'll have to go and study on your own over the weekend, and maybe just listen to some videos about prayer in the public forum, and which is the other one. But nevertheless, I'll just share it with you maybe by tomorrow morning. Okay, so yes, we're going to take a look at post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of you may have had post-traumatic stress before. I guess I was one of those guys that carried post-traumatic stress, I don't know, for some time, and I didn't realize it at the stage, but you realize it when you get blackouts, and then it's almost too late. So you have to take care of yourself. Remember, stress is it's a preventative process, and even post-traumatic stress is a preventative process or a recovery process. Remember our can of oil? We said, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. Remember that 2 points, it will be in your test. So the hiding place is, and I told you about the hiding place of Corrie ten Boom. It's a notification memoir about Corrie ten Boom's experience in World War II. A bestseller after its publications in 1971. It tells the story of how ten Boom and her sister, two unmarried women in their 50s, became involved with the Dutch underground during the Nazi occupation of Netherlands. The authors vividly capture the members of the ten Boom family, their friends, and the people they helped, and the Germans they encountered during and after the war. The narrative told in ten Boom's voice is heavily informed by her Christian faith and that of her co-authors, John and Elizabeth Sherrill. An amazing story. You can go and find it on Amazon, or you can find it online somewhere. So, stress affects everyone, and that you should know. It affects the baby, it affects in the womb, because even the baby can sense the mother's stress. It affects everybody and everyone in our sphere. So, however, not everyone deals with stress in the same manner. People bring things from their past into their present problems. As a chaplain, you will need to understand all of this and be able to help them to see it as well. So you need to understand the fact that they are bringing situations from the past into their future, and this is going to cause them more harm than good. If you carry baggage from the past, and you will all, every day you'll get a blast from the past, every day when you carry that baggage, because as soon as your arms get tired about carrying this baggage, I'm talking about your emotional arms, then of course you'll think back about what you endured during that time, and that is the baggage you are carrying at this moment. So if you are carrying anything, just let it go. Just let it go, because that's the most important thing in any counseling session, is to let it go. There's a story being told about a tug of war of an alligator. I found the story on a website called Ministry 127. I love to use their illustrations, but this one is a true story. On a hot summer day in South Florida, a little boy decided to go for a swim in the old swimming hole behind his house. In a hurry to dive into the cool water, he ran out to the back door, leaving behind shoes and socks and shirts and whatever he left behind. And he flew into the water, not realizing that he swam towards the middle of the lake. An alligator was swimming towards the shore, towards him. His mother in the house was looking out the window and saw the two as they got closer and closer together. In utter fear, she ran towards the water, yelling to her son as loudly as she could. Hearing her voice, the little boy became alarmed and made a U-turn in the water and swam to his mother with the alligator behind him and catching up, of course. It was too late for the boy. So just as he reached her, the alligator reached him also from behind. From the dock, the mother grabbed her little boy by the arms, just as the alligator snatched the legs of the boy. Then that incredible tug of war started between the mother and the alligator. Now, the alligator was much stronger than the mother, of course, but the mother was so passionate not to let go of her boy. And she was screaming and fighting, trying to get this alligator away from her boy's legs. Now, my farmer happened to drive by and he heard the screams from his pickup. He stopped with his truck close to them. He took out his shotgun, he aimed at the alligator, and he killed it. Remarkably, after 2 weeks and some weeks in the hospital, the little boy survived this attack. His legs were extremely scarred by the vicious attack of the animal. And on his arms were deep scratches where his mother's fingernails dug into his flesh in her effort to hang on to the son she loved so much. Now, the newspaper reporter who interviewed this boy after the trauma asked the boy, you know, if he could show these scars to the reporter. So the boy lifted up his pants, you know, and he showed the reporter. And when it became obvious, he said to this reporter, "But look at my arms. Look at my arms. I have great scars on my arms also. I have them because my mom wouldn't let go." Isn't that amazing? Instead of getting mad at those who try to help you to do the right and best thing for yourself, you know, and we are putting against the world, and we are catching our loved ones' arms, and we need to duck into their flesh and pull them out of the alligator's mouth from the devil. You should be thankful that they love you and never let go. Beautiful story. I showed you this video, and I'm sure you found it online. Now, there's some symptoms. You can find these in cumberlandheights.org. It's 17 symptoms. I just would like to stress you. You know, it's the Tennessee Post-Traumatic Stress and Trauma Center's 17 symptoms. Now, the first one is intrusive thoughts. This is what you won't find this in your manual. It won't be in your test also, but it's important for the chaplain to note. You know, what's the symptoms of PTSD? Intrusive thoughts are perhaps the best known symptom of PTSD. What do intrusive thoughts look like? A person going about the day is suddenly confronted by unwelcome, distressing memories of what just happened to them some time back. It can be even a long period back. Now, this may happen in a related setting. For example, a person who has gone through a car accident may begin to panic in a vehicle. He doesn't want to sit in front, or he doesn't want to sit at the back. He doesn't want to sit on this side or this side, or he doesn't want to travel the same route. In all of out of the blue, he will just feel depressed. Now, that is one of the symptoms. Some others, they experience nightmares. The trauma survivors regularly deal with nightmares, because when you are, you know, if this incident changes your brain's functioning so drastically, you will be impacted negatively by that. Now, research from the US Department of Veterans Affairs, and that's VA for Veterans Affairs, has indicated that 71% to 96% of those with PTSD may have nightmares. So if you have nightmares, ask yourself the question, maybe you're just suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Those with co-occurring mental illnesses are also at higher risk for vivid, disturbing dreams. Now, also, some others the reminding of the event, they will avoid those. They will drive another route. The PTSD changes the way a person lives their lives. One of the major effects of trauma is avoidance. We want to avoid the place of the hurt. For example, someone who nearly drowned will probably avoid going for a swim alone. However, they might even avoid taking a bath or going to the beach because it reminds them too much of what just happened some time back. These avoidant behaviors can be debilitating, and those who are dealing with them are encouraged to seek professional trauma treatment as soon as possible. Then we have memory loss. So I've got PTSD then, because after COVID, I guess all of you who had COVID, you suffer from memory loss sometimes. You know, you forget names, you forget places and dates and stuff like that. Traumatic events impact the brain's functioning. While many people assume that this is due to the physical brain injury, it's frequently a case of the body attempting to cope with what just happened. Now, the hippocampus, amygdala, and prefrontal cortex are strongly associated with stress and memory. When something traumatic happens, memory loss occurs as a natural defense mechanism. Without proper treatment, these memories may resurface at any time, resulting in significant distress. So you need to treat this, and you need to be debriefed. The fifth one, negative thoughts about self and the world. If you think about the world, how do you perceive the world? Excuse me. People who have been through trauma see the world differently. They don't see the world the same. I just want to allow some students in. There we go. They don't see the world the same. They may feel hopeless and live with a foreshortened future and inability to visualize future milestones, or when they're at old age. It's also common for them to see themselves in a bad light always. When they look at themselves in the mirror, they always see someone that's a threat to them. One of the 17 symptoms of PTSD is a negative perception of the self and the world at large. And that is a pain for everybody. If you see the world in a negative way, it's going to hurt not only you, it's going to hurt everybody that hears you. Because as soon as they hear you, they want to shut their ears because you are so negative. Client-centered therapy seeks to build a person's self-esteem after a traumatic incident. And we need to get our clients to a client-centered therapy session so that they can be debriefed and appropriately. And they will also be then reassured that they are worthy of success and healing. You need to motivate them, that they will feel self-motivated, that they can also get there, you know what I mean? Then point 6, self-isolation, feeling distant from other people. After something terrible happens, it's difficult to connect with other people. People with PTSD may have a hard time being around people for a few different reasons. These include potential triggers, as well as an inability to relate to their friends. If you have been through a traumatic event and feel like your loved ones just don't understand, we encourage you to speak with a professional therapist ASAP. Then number 7, anger and irritability. PTSD creates a state of hyperarousal in many cases. Now this means that the brain is kicked into a state of a fight and flight response at the slightest urging of something. Hyperarousal results in strong emotions like anger, as well as general irritability on a day-to-day basis. Those who have been traumatized may lash out to others, even if they don't fully understand why they do it. But if it happens, of course, you will then know the reason why it happens is because you are traumatized. You have probably some post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, number 8, reduced interest in favorite activities. The interesting things doesn't seem interesting anymore. Negative life events make it difficult to enjoy one's loved activities. The mood changes, sleeplessness, and avoidance associated with PTSD mean that a person might feel unmotivated and uninterested in their work or hobbies. Another symptom is hypervigilance. After a traumatic event, the body enters into a state of hypervigilance. This increased alertness ensures that a person is always prepared for another threat that may come. However, this state of extreme awareness is exhausting to a person and upsetting also for trauma sufferers especially, making it among the most upsetting of the 17 symptoms on this list. Number 10, difficulty concentrating. Yeah, a lot of kids got post-traumatic stress. Hyperarousal and anxiety also take away one's ability to concentrate. Individuals who have undergone a traumatic event struggle to readjust at work, home, and school because their minds are often elsewhere. And that's one of the signs and symptoms of PTSD. Number 11, insomnia or restlessness or sleeplessness. Insomnia is another typical symptom of PTSD. To go to bed, a person has to let their guard down, which is especially difficult for hypervigilant trauma sufferers like the one above. It's difficult for them to go and switch off in bed. Some people never get sleep because of the post-traumatic stress disorder. Excuse me. Additionally, the nightmares they may face at bedtime can make sleep also unattractive and not something they want to do at that stage. Many people who have experienced trauma struggle to sleep, and they may turn to alcohol or drugs in order to calm their minds. However, this approach can result in issues with substance use disorders. Then we have number 12, vivid flashbacks. Flashbacks are different from intrusive thoughts. Those who have flashbacks may feel as though the traumatic event is happening all over again. The memories can become so vivid that they seem to be happening in the current moment. This can cause people to panic, resulting in a sudden aggressive response to the other person or other party. They may be triggered by something as subtle as someone's cologne or a certain tone of voice when they speak. It can activate them. And those who have flashbacks are encouraged to ground themselves through the 5 senses. Naming 5 things they can see can be a calming distraction. Just naming those, what I see now at this stage, and this and that. It helps you just to distract yourself and distract your mind of the things that's hurting you. Avoiding people or places and things related to this event. Now, any reminder of a traumatic event can catalyze a flashback in your heart and your mind. That's why many trauma sufferers become reclusive, avoiding people, places, and things related to what happened. While this may make sense on paper, this behavior can actually be problematic to some. Just trying not to think about it, something like that, is a coping mechanism that can actually worsen one's symptoms over time. Some years back, I had to give the bad news to a family that their son was shot and killed in a transito attack. I cannot remember what was the dates, but maybe it was just when we came over to the Metro Police back in 2000, maybe a little bit later, 2003, around about there. So he was killed, and also his partner was shot in the shoulder, but this one was shot in the head, and the other one was shot in the hip. So I had to go and tell the family about the son that was just killed. At that stage, I think he was divorced or something. But nevertheless, so for years after this event, we would have annual memorial services for those who died in the line of duty. And then we will come together at one place there in Gauteng. And then we will have this memorial service at the Gauteng Traffic Department for all the officers who died. And then when I'm the speaker and they're in the audience, they will always, when they see me, they cry. Because I remind them of their boy who was killed, And then that's the problem. So what will happen is, sometimes they would probably in the future want to avoid me because I remind them of the pain they endured back in 2003. Then we've got number 14, casting blame. Now, self-blame is especially common after a traumatic event. People with PTSD may blame themselves for what happened, especially if it is resulted in the injury or death of a loved one. However, they may also assign blame to others who were associated with what happened there. For example, after a boating accident, the traumatized person may point the finger at the driver of the boat and say, "You." They might also assign blame themselves for not calling out or wanting the driver in time. Number 15, difficulty feeling positive emotions. Anger, sadness, and guilt are the emotions primarily associated with PTSD. So these are all anger and sadness and guilt will direct you and show you that this person may have other symptoms of PTSD. However, this condition also dampens a person's ability to regulate positive emotions from within. Researchers have found that the victims of domestic violence struggle to engage in goal-directed actions, control impulsive behaviors, and accept their positive emotions while in a good mood. Number 16 says, exaggerated startle response. A key aspect of hypervigilance is an exaggerated startle response. One of the 17 symptoms of PTSD is caused by the constant feeling of being on guard, always being on the edge. Who's watching? Who's going to attack me now? A small noise may cause a victim of trauma to become jumpy, And then number 17, risky behaviors. Finally, risky behaviors are especially common among those who have undergone trauma. Individuals with a high number of adverse childhood experiences, for example, are more likely to try substance at a younger age and to develop an addiction from that age. Combat veterans fall into this category too. They have higher levels of addiction than the general population has because they try to forget what just happened in war. Risky behaviors can include drug abuse, alcoholism, unsafe sex, high adrenaline activities, and behavioral addictions like gambling and shopping, ladies. Now, those who are coping with the trauma through compulsive comfort seeking. Now, what we call, compulsive comfort seeking is like you gamble, you shop, and you do this, and you feel better. Those people should seek professional treatment as soon as possible because it can cost you a lot of money if you have this compulsive comfort kind of seeking way to deal with your PTSD. Now, you should know that PTSD is a pathological disorder. Now, I will also ask you, don't tell me when I ask you what does PTSD stand for, don't tell me it's a pathological disorder. I know. What does PTSD stand for? It stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. One critical incident stress event can produce enough stress response in the body to forever change. Interesting. To forever change the brain. That's what happens. What you don't know about a person, this is one of our axioms in chaplaincy. What you don't know about a person sometimes is more important than the things you know about that person. I always ask myself this thing: what do I know about this person? Remember the Samaritan mentality? What do I remember about? What do I know about this person? What do I don't know about this person? They found that kids after World War II developed a lot of eating disorders when the war was over because of their fear of not having food to eat. They would develop this disorder and just eat and eat and eat. So what the orphanage did, many others followed later, and every evening when the children would come for supper, they would give them also, the food as well as a loaf of bread, to sit on the table, so that they can take this bread to bed, so that they may know tomorrow morning I will have food. You give them the security, the surety that they'll have something to eat tomorrow if they have the bread next to their bowl of food. So this kids all recovered because of this, way of doing things. Now, this is the chronology of the pathology, and this is what happens, to lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. Police forces, 1 out of 5 suffer from PTSD. Did you know that? When you see a police officer, and maybe there are 5 in the group, one of those are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and they will spend a lot of time from the job, and it will cost the government, it costs governments all over the world millions and millions of dollars and rands, to pay for sick leave and to pay for clinics because of the, of the aftermath of the chronology of the pathology. Examples include, what they experience is things like rape and violent attacks. They see these things, trauma accidents. They see also sudden destruction of your house or community, or even a threat or harm to their own bodies or their relatives. But the chronology starts with the event. Everything starts with an event. Even your marriage started with an event, and then it was trauma. Now, physical symptoms is to follow them. Physically, people will, they will show that they've got post-traumatic stress disorder through their bodies. Their bodies will show it. And if you monitor the symptoms, you'll probably find out that these people have been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder for a long time. Then we've got the emotional symptom side. People will withdraw, and some others will have cognitive symptoms. You will go through all of these stages to get to post-traumatic stress disorder, but it always starts with the event. And then it leads to cognitive symptoms, of course. Then also some others will have hyperarousal in all of these categories of the air. Then others will have fear of repetition, that these things will happen again, and recurrence of this event, flashbacks and dreams. But these symptoms must last longer than 30 days to be diagnosed. So if these symptoms, the physical, the emotional, and the cognitive, or hyperarousal and all of these, keep on going on for longer than 30 days, this person probably would have post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD, you will always ask, who gets it? Now, what they say is, excuse me, 40% of people with trauma, physical trauma, will have post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you see somebody in a car accident, for example, you see 100 accidents in a year. And so 40% of those people who was involved in an accident, I'm not talking about bumper bashings, I'm talking about serious accidents, which physical trauma is experienced. Physical trauma, like for example, you're losing a limb or you're in pain, whatever the case may be, 40% will experience it. 50% of sexual assault victims will experience it. So if 100 ladies were raped this year, 50% of them will experience post-traumatic stress. And then also 60% of incest victims will experience, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, what is incest? Not insect, incest. It's human sexual activity between family members. That's what it is. Or even close relatives, like your mother-in-law, something like that. It's a close relative. Now, this typically includes sexual activity between these people who is, blood relations. And someone sometimes, related by affinity, marriage, or step family, like your somebody you adopted, or a clan or a lineage, somebody like that. Then we have 70% of people who was witnessing torture, seeing somebody else being tortured, they will have post-traumatic stress disorder. And then we have 90% of torture victims will experience. I think if I was a torture victim, I would also experience post-traumatic stress. I don't like to suffer. I think no one likes to suffer. Now, not everyone who experiences trauma will get PTSD, by the way. Still, there is a 60% chance when you have physical trauma, you won't have it. There is a 50% chance you won't have it when you are sexually assaulted. But 40%, when you're sleeping with your whatever family, 40% of them, they don't get post-traumatic stress disorder. And then 30% and 10% over there. Okay, let's move on. So groups likely to experience this is combat veterans. They will experience post-traumatic stress, and they're likely to do. So if you speak to combat veterans and they've been in people of war, then you know that the probability is very likely that they would be experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder for so long now. Also, emergency relief workers, they will feel depleted because of all the emotions they are sitting in while putting in their relief works. If there's an earthquake and they go for this, or they're from the Red Cross and they go and debrief people at the site of the emergency, they will be depleted at the end. Some people will stay for 2 weeks and they will come back, after this relief work, and they will be traumatized. They will also have post-traumatic stress disorder. And also the ESPs, as we've discussed the other night, and that ESPs is the emergency services personnel, and we studied their profile also. They're also likely to have post-traumatic stress because they come to scenes, not expecting what to see, and then all of a sudden they see what they don't want to see. They hear what they don't want to hear. They have to do what they don't want to do. And also we've got victims of sexual assault. They will also be patients of PTSD and violence, or even traumatic injury victims, all of them. Now, there's some criteria have to be on the lookout for, I cannot remember if this is in your test. There's some criteria. You have to identify at least 2 of them. So if you get such a question, it's one of these. So criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, and these are the things that will show you that people have it. They've got it. A horrific or horrible, gross, disgusting, or frightening event. This is criteria. So if people were on such a scene, accident scene, or an attack on a farm, or whatever the case may be, where people died and it's horrific, it's horrible, it's gross, then that's one of the criteria. Some others will have intrusive images, seeing the event, hearing it, smelling it, tasting it always. I can remember some of my advanced chaplains that's on here tonight, they will remember the story. I've told it a number of times. So what happened was, some years back when I was still a theology student, I was doing point duty at TIACSC, well, Swartkops, let's say Swartkops Air Force. And I was doing the traffic control there when I was a student in 1994, excuse me, 1994, yes. So what happened was, I was supposed to do a point, regulate traffic. When I come there, there's this major accident. The bus just drove over a BMW, ripping the BMW apart, and all three sisters also in the car. Now that image has stayed with me for a number of years. I mean, I couldn't forget that. And even seeing the event in my mind, playing it out day after day and after day, hearing it, the crying of the mama, the crying of the daddy, smelling it and tasting it, because when you are traumatized by a scene like that, you can even taste the scene when you go home. And I mean, it's been more than 20 years back, 30 years. Oh, I don't want to tell you how long it was. I can still remember it. And then we've got the avoidance criteria. This is also the avoidance criteria. It's like avoiding places, conversations, people of or experiences that reminds us of this experience. And then we've got arousal, having a hard time shutting down, constantly feeling on the edge. And then we've got symptoms, that last longer than 30 days. If you see some of the people's got physical, emotional symptoms that's lasting longer than 30 days, they probably need help. You can help. You can help them, you can speak to them, or you can refer them. And also significant disruption in normal life pursuit. That's also one of the criteria. Now, there is treatment for people suffering from PTSD. Some people won't speak to you, but if you ask them, just give me a shot. You've got nothing to lose. You've been suffering from this for 20 years. Not really. But just give me a shot and let me speak to you. Because as soon as they start to speak about this event, you encourage them, to let it go, Well, there is medication. That's one of the treatments. There's also counseling. There's also prayer and scripture. If you do not give medication, don't give medication. If you're not a licensed doctor, you're not supposed to give medication, okay? If you're not a licensed counselor, you should not do counseling, but otherwise you can do biblical counseling. If you want to enroll for a counseling course, you let me know, but also then prayer. You can offer prayer, you can offer scripture and encouragement, and to help them to get through this stressful event. Very stressed. All right. Well, is there any questions? Any questions? Aha. Okay, no questions. So then it means we can move on. Maybe. I guess, if we push, we can still be finished before 9. So it's okay. We will take a break maybe after this. We'll see how time goes. This session isn't long, but the next session we have still to do tonight. Otherwise, I'll have to probably give you homework. So page 68, you'll find this. And this is critical incident stress, in short, CIS, not CSI. All right, so what is critical incident stress? Now, that is a stress that goes beyond the norm. It goes beyond what we normally, anticipate in stressful situations. If I would ask you, what do you think is a stressful, CIS? You would probably say to me, because your thoughts go back to your own pain, your own sadness. So you would probably go to that and say, that was traumatic. That was a critical incident. It overwhelms your normal coping skills also. There's a story being told about a lady. She was busy washing her baby, 2-year-old, or was it younger? I cannot remember. And she was washing the baby in the bath, and she heard a noise in the living room, and it was the breaking of glass. But she knew that it was the glass table in the living room that broke. So she ran, and she came to the living room, and she saw a 12-year-old. She was trying to stand on the glass table, trying to do something with the fan, and then the glass table just collapsed on her and broke and cut her main artery off. So she was bleeding out. So mommy immediately took something to push the wound and carry her to the car, and they drove to the hospital. No, now as they drove to the hospital, she remembered that the baby's in the bathroom, busy bathing, and she called her husband from the job and she said immediately, please go to the house. Our baby's in the bath, and I'm on my way to take Sissy to the ER. She's bleeding out. So what happened was husband went to the house, and found the baby already blue, and also taking him to the ER. So when the mama arrived in the ER, a 12-year-old was dead. Daddy, was phoned, and he made an accident. He also died in a car crash because of the traumatic event. So she lost 3 people. It's almost like that. Remember back in 2020, 2019, there was 2 families, who burned dead in Mpumalanga. Remember, at their holiday destination, they were just, they burned dead. 2 weeks ago, there was a school teacher here in Rustenburg who was killed in a car crash, and her husband, as well as one of her children. So the boy lost his parents both, as well as his sibling. It's sad. It overwhelms your coping skills. You cannot handle this alone. You need somebody. You need somebody that you can lean on. There's also a song here, lean on me when you're not strong. You remember it? They need somebody. And it's you, Chaplain. It is seen as having life-changing consequences because traumatic incidents like this thing that happened on 9/11, it changes your whole idea of how to cope with things. You forget how to cope with things. It's like you are in a trance all the time because of the pain you endure. I would suggest that you would watch the movie 9/11. It's a fantastic telling of what happened on that day. Now, there's many conspiracies about that. I don't care about conspiracies. I don't know what happened really, but all I know is people died, and thousands of them, and it hurts tens of thousands, maybe millions of people. Now, what's the definition of CIS? For a chaplain to understand this, we need to take a look at these definitions. Now, Roger Solomon, and he's a doctor, Dr. Roger Solomon, he said, any situation beyond the realm of a person's usual experience that overwhelms his or her sense of vulnerability and or lack of control over the situation. That's what it is. Also, any situation faced by emergency service personnel that causes them to experience unusually strong emotional reactions, which have the potential to interfere with their ability to function either at the scene or later. Now, this is Dr. Jeff Mitchell. We use his debriefing tool. And then we've got another definition, a life experience or series of experiences that so seriously upsets the balance of the individual that it creates changes in the person's emotional, cognitive, or behavioral functioning. This is by Daniel A. Goldfarb and as well as Gary S. Humiller. Now, the one I like, I'm a simple person. I like short things, just to keep it simple. The shortest one and the best definition for me personally is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. So when a person goes ballistic because of the trauma event, it's not normal reaction. It's not something normal that just happened. So their reaction is a normal reaction. It's not abnormal to go ballistic at the scene. It's not abnormal to not want to speak at the scene or not to cry for your loved one. It's not abnormal, but it's a normal reaction to an abnormal event. So line of duty deaths and injury and shootings, it comes to, when we talk about CIS, it comes to show that Leo, remember Leo is the law enforcement officer, he's a normal person reacting to an abnormal event. Because when he reacts, it's just the way he needs to do that. Well, I mean, we want to also speak about suicide of a coworker can cause CIS. When one of your colleagues commits suicide, some years back, one of our colleagues, many colleagues will commit suicide ultimately, but this specific one, that was back in 1998 or 1999. One of the superintendents in the old traffic department, which I served, and also as an ad hoc chaplain, he just committed suicide. Nobody knew about that. Well, let me rather say, not the right people knew about that. Only, people knew about his killing, self-killing. And he told some people that he was going to kill himself. And they didn't think he was serious about that. And he did. He shot himself, but praise God, he had 2 weeks in ER or trauma unit. He was in a coma, but still, we spent time together, and I trust God that he saved his precious soul. So, so suicide can cause people to, be in pain and shock because they didn't expect that. It can happen to anyone. It can even happen to you, that you will be, the victim of this kind of suicidal thinking and suicide even. It can also causes pressures of job and personal life in the workplace. It causes people to feel pressurized. And also guilt may develop. Sometime back, one of the Metropolis, people's girl, she committed suicide. And she was in the admin block. And she was, quite depressed, if memory serves correct, because, she was very depressed. And she had a sad, life. I mean, not her marriage, but she was sad always, I could sense it and I could see it. And she was always sad. But this specific day, it was a bad day at work. Her colleagues gave her, hell, if I can say it in that way. So she went home and shot herself in the head. So some people, they felt very guilty about that. And that's the thing about, you shouldn't feel, of course, guilt helps sometimes, but you shouldn't stay in that emotional roller coaster, because you will never move forward when you have to move with guilt. It's like the baggage of the past you bring into the future. You'll have to forgive yourself and move on. Nobody expected that, not even me. I didn't expect that she would ever do that. She was in and out of clinics, and I always attended to her. I never expected that she would go there and just shoot herself. So what happens also with the CIS, the world will be turned upside down. Completely. Your world will never be the same. Also, death of a serious injury to a child. When your child is seriously injured, it will just push you over the edge. That's a critical incident. And also, it can be viewed as an unfair or an unjust act, because he's just a child. I mean, why would God do this? And therefore, we come to factors of identification. We will identify that we are the victims, but meantime, it's just the way life goes. We also have people that have prolonged failure rescue attempts. For example, the absolute need to succeed, because we have this absolute need to succeed. We want to be successful, and if we're not, we can fall prey to this prolonged failed rescue attempt of ourselves. Some others would have seen mass casualty incidents where a number of people died in a car crash, or a number of people died in a train crash. The enormity of the situation can be more than the ability to cope with this. Then we also have safety is unusually jeopardized. The person's safety. They will face society's underbelly daily. And this is what cops face every day of their lives. They face the underbelly because they do not have the needed respect from the public, and they do not have the needed love from the public, because we train one another to hate cops, and that's unfair to them. That's what's going on in America these days. These days they've got something they call back the blue, but then some time back during lockdowns, they would say, ban police, or we don't need police. Come on, man. Just imagine the world without police. it will be worse than the Wild Wild West. If you watch that kind of movies, it will be worse than that. So also vulnerability and lack of control can trigger a critical incident in your heart, in your mind, in your spirit. Victim is also known to the responders often, if the responder comes to the scene and he sees the person, he will probably know the person. And you're not prepared. And sometimes you'll even feel responsible because this person died. If you just say to him, listen, I will come to your house. Some others will feel bad because they told their loved one, I'm finished with you. And the loved one jumped in the car, make a severe accident, dies on the scene. And they will feel that somewhat responsible for that. If only I would have gotten here sooner, they would say. If only I did this or that. But you cannot. You cannot be responsible for that because you're not having a gun in your hands. Now, there's three groupings about the magnitude of the response. According to Daniel Goldfarb and Gary Omiller. The three groupings are those who experience little to no reaction at all. I wish we all as chaplains could be in that sense, lucky like that, to experience little to no reaction to the event. But then there's also those who experience moderate symptoms, moderately. For example, come to a scene, you cry, you're sad with the couple, you're sad that they lost somebody special and close to them. And then you get those who experience severe symptoms while visiting the scene. Severe symptoms because of what they've seen. And it changes their brain also. Although they are secondary victims, they're almost reacting like primary victims of the scene. Now, the officer who comes to the scene would probably be a primary victim because he sees the blood, he sees the guts, he sees everything. The secretary who types the report afterwards, she'll also be a victim of trauma because she's secondary. She's what the officer has seen on his, she sees on his statements, on his reporting. And then we have some other contributions about magnitude, nature of the event. If the responder remains in control, the less the event will affect them. If they can just remain in control, that's important. And also the degree of the warning. Less warning often leads to a more severe response. Warning provides the responder with time to develop a coping strategy. For example, say somebody tells them, I'm going to kill myself. Then you'll have time to prepare yourself with the coping strategy to help this person ASAP. Then we have the ego, strength coping style. Our personality plays a role in our ability to cope. That's what's happening. Now, this is due in part to genetics, but also is impacted by past experiences, because what you bring from the past can be good also because you come from a learned experience to the future. Philosophical and spiritual beliefs also plays a role in our coping strategy, and it will help us to cope better with things we cannot endure on our own, because God will help you through it. Then we've got prior mastery of similar experiences. Again, the past. Practice makes perfect, or practice makes better. Success in a past similar situation will build confidence and cause the responder to think more clearly and positively about the scene. So when a first responder comes to a scene, or a chaplain for that matter, who comes to a scene and there's somebody dead on the scene, first off, you will be traumatized. You'll be traumatized. And the second time, you'll be traumatized again. And then you will become used to it. And practice makes better. If you practice in this, and if you go out with the police and you see these things, it will help you to be stronger next time. And then we have the proximity. The proximity says this has to do with the involvement. The more involved in the incident the responder is, the greater the impact of that scene. There is also a psychological factor, such as having a child the same age as the one who died on the scene. And that's what we call proximity. And past experiences, seemingly unrelated, may cause some stress symptoms in that regard. We also have the amount of stress in one's life. Now, if a responder is experiencing a high level of stress in their personal life, it can affect his or her ability to cope with the incident. Then we also have the nature and degree of support available to the responder after this incident. Now, the responder's willingness to accept support is important. If they push others away under the guise of he or she can handle it, or I can handle it, don't worry about me, it can affect how they respond to the situation and other situations that follow. Because they need to understand that support comes mostly from their peers, supervisors, chaplains, as well as the professionals and their family. So there's some reactions, and we've got 3 reactions to CIS, critical incident stress. And the first one is acute stress reaction, acute reaction. It shows up shortly after the incident. Just after the incident will come, is acute. And this is good because it clears what caused the symptom. It's clear to you. And also support at its highest at that moment. For example, when you have to bury somebody, is that's what you call the support is all, everybody is there. And then individual is more open to receiving help at that stage because of it, the help is next door. Then we've got the delayed reaction in CIS. Symptoms may appear, up to a few months later, like the person we explained to in our stress segment, delayed stress syndrome. Remember that? We said that symptoms may come later. It's like a person who, arranges the funeral, arranges the sleeping, oversleeping for people, arranging the food, the coffin, the church, the pastor, and everything. And then afterwards, they will, just crack and break up. They will just break down. That's what we call the delayed stress reaction, or delayed critical incident stress reaction. Now, symptoms may appear at once or on a pile, or it will pile up through time. Not a clear association between event and symptoms, and the responder feels they are going crazy. So what happens is you'll feel, oh my goodness, I do not understand how this linked to this traumatic event, but that's because it's about, you've experienced the CIS, the critical incident, and it will cause a delayed reaction in your body, in your emotions, in your heart, in your. It's not a painless game. This to be a first responder, it costs you. It's hurtful sometimes. So they're also likely to seek the needed help whenever they need to. Then we have the cumulative stress reaction, and then this repeated exposure contributes to the response. It just accumulates the whole time. You never speak to somebody, but it accumulates. The longer a person serves as a first responder, the greater number of critical events they will have experienced at that stage. And these people are the most difficult to help because of their nature, because they've hardened. Stress has hardened them, and everything I've seen hardened them. Their symptoms come from out of the blue all of a sudden, and they will just have a burst out, or they may even doubt that and fear that they're losing it when the symptoms pops out and say, what's going on with me? Why do I cry about the lady who just, have a bumper bashing? Remember our cumulative stress disorder? We said the last straw breaks the camel's back. This is what happens. Also in critical incident stress. Many questions their ability to do their job, and yet they do not think of seeking help for them. Yeah, that was quick. My goodness. That was real quick. Excuse me. Is there anybody who have a question? No questions. You want to go to bed or what? I need about 30 minutes of your time still, if it's okay. Right. So we're going to discuss the management of critical incident stress. So if you want to leave the room, don't tell us about that. Just leave it quickly. Come back as soon as you can. But I still have some energy in me. I guess it's best for us just to move on. If we've got energy and lights on, we're good. We're good to go. Because you never know when the lights go off. So you'll find this on page 71, and that's the management of CIS. Very important section, because in this section, you'll have about 7, 8, 9, 10, I cannot remember, points of questions in this segment of the work. And you will always use this model. Remember what we said CIS is? It's a stress that goes beyond the norm. or beyond the normal. And we also said it overwhelms the normal coping skills completely. We also said it is seen as having life-changing consequences. That's what CIS is. So it's something that goes beyond the normality of things in the world. Now, it's defined as stress directly resulting from a trauma or a series of traumas. Now, critical incident stress education can forewarn and forearm the potential victim so that when the symptoms occur, they will know that such symptoms are in fact normal response to abnormal circumstances. So when the person maybe experience sexual dysfunction or time distortion or whatever they may experience, you would know that it's normal for a stressful person or a person that's encountering PTSD, that they are having this problem is normal. What are the 5 types of PTSD? Because there are 5 types of PTSD. It's just for interest sake. I mean, I do not want to ask you any questions about that because I cannot remember. I don't think even it's in your manual. But it's a normal stress response. First up, normal stress response is what occurs before PTSD begins. It's a normal stress. Then we've got this acute stress disorder. And then we have the uncomplicated PTSD, one that's not very complicated. Then we've got the complex PTSD, and then the comorbid PTSD, the one that they just want to die. So yes, so there is the 5 types of PTSD. There are 5 types of PTSD. You'll manage those as you go along, and you'll see people who suffers from a normal stress response or a acute stress response or a unaccomplished or uncomplicated, stress response or a PTSD. Now, what's a normal stress response? I mean, it doesn't make sense that people think stress is normal because stress is not supposed, but stress is normal. Normal stress response is what occurs between or before PTSD begins. However, it goes not always, well, it does not always lead up to the full-blown disorder. Events like accidents, injuries, illnesses, surgeries, and other sources of unreasonable amounts of tension and stress can all lead to this response. Typically, normal stress response can be effectively managed with the support of loved ones, peers, individuals, groups, group therapy and sessions, group therapy sessions, and so on. Individuals suffering from normal stress response should see a recovery within a few weeks. With acute stress disorder, while not the same as PTSD, it can occur in people who have been exposed to what is or what feels like a life-threatening event. Natural disasters, loss of loved ones, loss of a job, or risk of death are all stressors that can trigger acute stress disorders in a person. If left untreated, however, acute stress disorder may actually develop into post-traumatic stress disorder. So it needs to be treated, otherwise it will develop further. It's like you not stopping the cancer, ultimately it will kill you. Acute stress disorder can be treated through individual and group therapy, even medication, as we said earlier, intensive treatments designed by a psychiatrist. Then we've got uncomplicated PTSD is linked to one major traumatic event. That's uncomplicated because you can pinpoint the event in the past, and you can say, this is the reason. This is versus obviously like with multiple events and is the easiest form of PTSD to treat. Symptoms of uncomplicated PTSD may include like avoidance again of trauma reminders, nightmares, flashbacks, the event itself, irritability, mood changes and swings, and changes in relationships. Uncomplicated PTSD can be treated through therapy, medication, as well as a combination of both of these. Then we also have the complex PTSD. That's the opposite of uncomplicated. It's like this exam that's coming, the complicated one. It is caused by multiple traumatic events, not just one, but multiple. Complex PTSD is common in abuse or domestic violence cases, killing of a loved one, repeated exposure to war or community violence, or sudden loss of a person in your life. Now, while they share the same symptoms, treatment of complex PTSD is a little more intense than that of uncomplicated PTSD. Individuals with complex PTSD can be diagnosed with borderline or antisocial personality disorder or dissociative disorders. They exhibit behavioral issues such as impulsivity, aggression, substance abuse, or sexual impulsivity. Or they can also exhibit extreme emotional issues such as intense rage, depression, even panic. They may have comorbid PTSD, the last one of the typical PTSDs. It's a blanket term for co-occurring disorders. It is applied when a person has more than one mental health concern, often coupled with substance abuse issues. Comorbid PTSD is extremely common amongst people, as many people suffer from more than one condition at a time. The best results are achieved when both the commoning mental health condition and the comorbid PTSD are treated at the same time. Now, many people who suffer from PTSD try to treat it on their own, and it's not possible. This can include self-medication and other destructive behaviors. Using drugs or alcohol is a way to numb the pain, but will only make things worse and prolong treatment in the end. These are, again, some symptoms of CIS, shocks, withdrawal. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we've seen a lot of symptoms tonight about stress, but nauseousness, suicidal thoughts, sleep disturbances, cynicism. We've explained to you in the previous class what cynicism means. It's like skepticism. I must actually change that word there. But in any case, sexual dysfunction, time distortion, hyperventilating, problems of authority figures. These are all symptoms people are experiencing. Some will even, they will kind of, have intrusive memories about what happened. Symptoms of intrusive memories may include recurrent, unwanted, distressing memories of the traumatic event, reliving the traumatic event as if it were happening again, flashbacks all the time, upsetting dreams or nightmares about the traumatic event. And others will experience severe emotional distress. So let's move on. Then agencies should provide preemptive training on effects of stress and CIS. Training people in your workplace will help to identify signs of stress. When people are stress overload, you can reach out to them before they reach the threshold. Remember our little, I think it's on the slide, I can't remember, but before they reach the threshold of stress, it's kind of, you can pay me later or you can pay me now. Come on. Now you can play a big role in training people in your workplace about this, because you can de-stress them before they are overstressed and overeat themselves and become more stressed and depressed. Chaplains need to learn and develop training that can be offered to their agency as a service to them. You can even, make contact with one of our peer group supporters or some of our other trainers, even myself. You can invite us to your workplace or even on a Zoom, whatever the case may be. We can help you with this, because it's important that you lay and do some good groundwork. So I love what Ben Franklin said, and you'll hear this often in our training: an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. Listen to what he said: an ounce of prevention, just a little bit of prevention, is better than a lot of cure. Because if you can prevent something, like the engine from seizing, and put good oil in your car, then you'll save a lot of money. You can also provide on-scene support as a first responder or a responder in that sense. It may involve providing coffee, refreshments, encouragement, even some confidence. You can offer peer support for them. People love peer support because, you see what those guys are doing? They're eating pizzas because they've been working over the clock. They've been working very long hours. And that helps them, if you're there, it helps them to just, de-stress and get a little bit better, you know, and heal up for that moment. But you need to be aware of signs of stress, you know, when you walk amongst them, so that you can immediately, you know, invite them and say, listen, I need to speak to you after this. Let's do a session, or let's do a 10 minutes together. You do not have to speak to people for hours. I mean, come on. Even myself, you know, I've got a um, 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 I'm doing counseling, and I do any kind of counseling, but I love to do relationship counseling. But my sessions is never more than 45 minutes. Never in my life I would have more than 40. Well, some people wouldn't want to speak to you for 45 minutes until you tell them you charge 40, you know, 450 rands per 45 minutes. Then they just want the 45 minutes. You know what I mean? So, but be aware of these stress signs, and you can identify them through just, you know, moving amongst people, moving around. Now, assist without getting in the way. You can assist them. You can assist them with your fine touch of humor sometimes, you know, even on the scene. Now, let me go back to the slide, you guys. Ladies, you see this persons are eating at the back there. There's a dead person in the street. Do you think it's normal for them to eat on site? I think it's normal to eat. Come on. People need to eat. And they've been working through the night, and they're working long hours. So they need food. I don't know the people, don't worry. All right. So also the next step in getting closer to the healing part of, you know, of all of this is demobilization of the person on site. Now, demobilization, you know, utilize the following as a mass casualty event. It means that disbanding a platoon or a group of relief workers coming to their aid. Now, the definition of demobilization, it's a brief informational and rest period immediately after personnel have been released from active duty at the scene of a large-scale traumatic incident and before they return to their routine duties. But this large scene requires 100 personnel or more that's been deployed on this large scene. Now, so a very short intervention takes place immediately following the event and would include all those involved. It consists of two segments, and these are the two segments. First one, provide personnel with info to assist with stress, and also provide them, with intervention techniques. You can do that as chaplain, because you'll be learning these things tonight. And also, secondly, provide for a brief period of rest and nutrition, rehydration prior to returning to the duties. And you can arrange that from their bosses. You cannot give them off and tell them, I guess it's better you go a little bit and rest for 20 minutes or an hour or so. You need to get their boss's permission, their supervisor's permission. And also transition time and time to encourage people, you know, to come back to work. That will also help to de-escalate or demobilize people. Now, what's diffusing? This is a short intervention, and it takes place shortly after the incident. Diffusing in family therapy can also be very helpful, where you as a chaplain provides a safe place for people to, you know, to come and speak to you as a chaplain. You'll have to diffuse or de-escalate the situation. And what I normally tell people is that do not make war at home, make love at home. That's the important thing. I mean, in marriages now, not regular relationships. The thing is about that is when we make war every day at our homes, who's hurt the most when there is war in your country? If it's civil war in our country, the person that gets, you know, hurt the most is our families and our children. And it's the same with war in their homes. Kids get hurt the most. So we shouldn't make war there. Make war in my office, I always tell them. That's better. Because before you go home, I will de-escalate and diffuse you, so that you can be at peace. And when you go home, I do not want them to leave angry. Well, I would rather let them leave angry than leave confused. That's what Dr. Mark Rutland said in one of our sermons yesterday. I'm watching the General Assembly of our church in Texas, San Antonio, online. So after this session, I'll be watching again until tomorrow morning because it's just so interesting for me. But in any case, it should occur before the responder goes off. And then also the goal is to help them normalize. They need to normalize before they re-enter.
Sandra.
They need to normalize their reactions.
Sandra.
And provide them with info and coping methods. So when you provide them with these, you know, and to identify those who need those support. Now, this session normally takes about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the group size and the number of people that is speaking, but never breach 40 minutes. Try to keep it even between that 20 to 40 minutes. If it's a group of maybe 15 people sitting there, and everybody wants to say something, of course, but don't go over 40 minutes because they need to return to their jobs. You need to normalize them and then let them get back to their jobs as soon as possible. So this is just the diffusing process. You always will start with an introduction. You go for the exploration. You go for the reaction. And then, well, let me just say this. In our 7-step Mitchell model, the exploration stage includes the fact and the thought process, okay? But then you go for information. You should be practical and you need to follow up with them. So the Mitchell model is a model we use. It's from Dr. Jeffrey T. Mitchell, taken from his book, Leading Authority on Critical Incident Stress Debriefings. Now, his critical incident stress debriefing material has been used extensively by a number of law enforcement agencies, emergency response agencies, as well as hospitals and the military to train and equip their people to address and deal with victims of critical incident stress. So we're just going to look at the slide and see every step of the Mitchell model, because this is the steps you're going to follow. You'll always start with the introductory phase. You'll have to do an introduction first. So I'm going to ask you this question. You'll have to write it down in specific order. If it's written in the wrong order, I'll just give you marks until, you know, if you have the wrong order on the 0.4, I'll just have to give you 3 out of 7 then, because the rest will be wrong then. So we always start with the introduction phase. You introduce yourself, and I'm going to discuss this in a bit, but let us just show you the slide first. And then we've got the fact phase, we've got the thought phase, and also we've got the reaction phase. We move to the symptom phase then, and then we move to the teaching phase, and then obviously we go for the re-entry. Now, I want to provide a disclaimer. When you use this, you can also provide this disclaimer. You need to, the chaplain would be advised to attend a similar course like this. Well, you're organizing a course. I'm giving you this course, and this is, I'm a Church of God chaplain. So we may give you this course. So yes, this is why I'm giving you this. But that's just a disclaimer. Now, the debriefing process in CIS is a carefully outlined process that is found to be very successful if the dynamics of the model and the sequential process are sustained. So in other words, if you start with introduction, you end and you end with re-entry, that is what we call the sequential process are sustained. A debriefing is a discussion or a group meeting with focus on one or more people. So you do not focus on everybody, because if it's a group of 20 people, you're going to sit there all night. So you'll focus on, on one or more people, like 1 or 3 people who have been involved in a critical or traumatic incident. Now, in this session, you would focus over there, and you make eye contact with the people. Normally, when I preach also, if I have the pulpit over here, I will scan my audience like this, and people will make eye contact with me as I scan from there, left to right, from left to right. So it's like bouncing eyes, but nevertheless. So if your group sits like this, you'll be able to debrief them, and this will be the regular type of seating. You cannot sit in another way. This is the most easiest way, most comfortable way, because then you sit face to face actually with the people. You can face one another. If you set yourself down here, you'll be in the middle or the center, and you can monitor everybody. You see, you can actually sit anywhere, but normally that's the best space to sit. The process goes like this, and as I said, always starts with the introduction, and it goes through to the re-entry. We've just explain this, but let's move for the explanation on that. When you start with the introduction phase, you always have to identify yourself and the team. So, for example, it's not only you, but it's also somebody else sitting with you in this session. You'll have to introduce your team to them. As can be seen by the model, the debriefing starts with an introduction always. The debriefing is conducted in a room where participants will not be disturbed by flow of traffic or other intrusions in the class. And those chaplains who have churches, you can always utilize the church building or the church office to distress people or to debrief people. You should explain the purpose of CISM. Now, CISM is the short for Critical Incident Stress Management. It won't be in your test, don't worry. But also explain the process. Remember now, this is educational and not therapy. You're not a therapist. You're not supposed to do therapy in the session. You just have to educate them regarding what they are facing right now. Because if they're not debriefed appropriately, it can cause more stress. And then obviously it will lead to post-traumatic stress. Explain also the results of the Confidentiality Act in our clauses as chaplains, because we've got a rule of confidentiality and we keep confidences no matter what, and you'll ensure the group in that setting that you won't break their confidence. If a confidence is slipped out here, it won't be you, it may be somebody else here. No one is required to speak in the session. Remember now, do not force people to speak. If they don't want to speak, don't force them. You'll just be, they'll just hate you for that. And you'll be the unpopular chaplain. So don't force them, just leave them if they don't want to speak. They will speak sometimes. Sometimes you'll sit in a session like that and you give a person a chance to speak and he said, no, pass me. You can pass me, chaplain, thank you. You go from person to person, you pass. Sometimes, when they hear another person is speaking, they will stand up and say, chaplain, listen, I want to say something also there. So is anyone present who should be a question you'll ask in the session. So you'll ask something like, I appreciate that everybody's here, but I want to ask, is there anybody in this room today with this debriefing session that wasn't involved in this scene? And if there's one or two persons, maybe they're just hiding away from the job and the responsibilities that at the job, so they want to join you. You need to get the group's permission to allow them to be there. You cannot just give them permission unless the group gives you permission. You'll ask, this people wasn't involved in the scene. So actually they're not supposed to be there. So the group have to give them permission. Now, you have to also consider the fact phase. Now, each person is given the opportunity to articulate the incident in their own words. Do not lay words in people's mouths and with their own emotions without fear or negative ramifications or even repercussions when they say something there. They shouldn't feel threatened at all. If an individual wishes not to speak, you should honor that. The chaplain will soon find out that very often those initially not wishing to speak, they will speak. So ask if, to give the name, where they work and who they work for, and what their role was at the event. So you can see how important it is that people need to be involved there. And also emphasis that this is only facts, not feelings. We will get to the feelings later, okay? So, but for now, we introduce ourselves, we come to the facts. And that the goal is not evaluate the tactics. So what you see here is typical, the therapist or the chaplain with the people there. Now you see the lady with the white shirt and the white shirt there. So she's focusing on these two. Can you see? That's just for demonstration. So it makes it easy if you spot this person and spot this person and if they are good speakers or good talkers, let me say that. You can see everybody's, ladies, I cannot see who's that smell, but so mostly everybody will be good talkers here. But you as a chaplain would probably know these people because you're doing workplace chaplaincy. So you'll ask them, won't you step out, please? Won't you step out and be the voice today and just breaking the ice for people to speak? I do that, but nevertheless. And then you have the thought phase, third point, and that is you can ask there, What was the very first thought that popped into your head as the scene unfolded? Now, I would guess that if you're afraid you're going to forget these things, just make a little, cards, flashcards like these, make flashcards like these and move with this. There's nothing wrong with that. I read my sermon off every Sunday. There's nothing wrong. Not really. Do not use the word feel. This is a cognitive approach, not a therapeutic approach. So remember now, this is not the feel phase. This is a time for the person being debriefed to attempt to articulate what they thought about during the incident, what they thought about. This phase is the point in the debriefing where many of those individuals who have been silent will begin to speak up. You may not even like what you hear, chaplain. Sometimes you'll hear very bad language. We have the reaction phase. And then we come to this point where, it's the time for emotions to surface. All of a sudden, you need to prepare yourself. Now, the chaplain should not be alarmed by tears or anger, shouting, swearing, acting out, some emotions or responses. This point is indeed the emotional epics of the debriefing session. So people will burst out. Remember, you may hear things that can never be unheard. So ask the question, if you could change one thing about this incident, with the exception of bringing back this person to life, what would that one thing be? So you kind of, krap the bigida to activate them, to tell you more about what they want and how they perceive themselves. Now we come to the symptom phase. Ask this question, what symptoms did you experience? What symptoms did you experience on and off scene? It would be helpful to share some of the symptoms if you can. You can tell them, listen, was somebody nauseous? Was somebody hyperventilating? So you can begin to inquire about and address the symptoms which are being experienced by those individuals right there. You can teach them how to breathe. You can train them, but later on. But I mean, you can say, well, this is kind of symptoms. Have anyone experienced these kind of symptoms? Two important things that takes place. They will learn that they are not alone when people speak up, as others will have similar symptoms in the room. And also the briefers will be able to identify specific symptoms to assist with direction in combating these problems also. Then we've got the teaching phase. You should teach them why their body and mind are doing what they are doing. It's the key to freeing them from many of the problems they are facing. Describe the typical stress reactions associated with a critical event. You can explain to them. You must remember to tell them, listen, it's normal to feel like that. You can also explain to them the fight and flight response in this segment and offer suggestions on how to reduce the stress, what they are feeling, and how to avoid these stress symptoms. And also teaching helps them to understand why they are having these thoughts, feelings, and symptoms that they are having and carrying with them. So remember, chaplain, this is normal to feel and react in this way. You may offer stress-reducing efforts and a plan if you wish. There is 3 types of stress. Can you remember those? The 3 types of stress back in our first, second, fourth session is general stress, and EU stress is a good stress, and then we've got this stress. Then you have the 3 increments of the levels of stress, and that's acute stress syndrome, as well as delayed stress syndrome, as well as the accumulative stress syndrome. You can explain these kind of things so they will understand what they are facing. So we've come to the last point of our Mitchell model, and then we're going to just look at some things to launch an effective diffusing session. Do not hurry this process. Do not hurry this re-entry process, because if you know you're on 40 minutes at this point, and then you'll have to try to manage it, but try to not use up all the time in the previous 6 phases. Encourage the group to seek medical help or symptoms that continue in counseling as well. And also summarize the comments of the group to ease concerns for the people. And then you can also ask, can you think of any good thing, one thing, which resulted from this incident? Any good thing? Well, obviously they will start to think about the good things that happen. Now, the last point I want to make tonight, before I leave you, is how does an effective diffusing session look like? It happens when you used a part of an overall CISM strategy. When you use this section I just provided you, and this, you should use this. If you use it in a strategy, you can strategize with your company and you can tell them, listen, I'll be your kingpin when we need to debrief somebody. You can use this material to train people to get involved not in chaplaincy per se, but into the support groups at the work, at your office. Have timely intervention also. Do not wait for too long after the event, because then it's not debriefing anymore. Then they have to go for counseling. It needs to be, like maybe 24 hours at most. Yeah, you're really pushing if you make it 48 hours, especially when the guys and ladies working shifts and they tell you, you phone the supervisor and tells them, listen, your people needs to be debriefed. Otherwise, it's going to be problems. Then they'll tell you, oh, chaplain, I'm sorry, I'm on 4 days rest. Can't you do something? Can't I come and see you? No, chaplain, I'll just come to your office when we're finished. I'll set up the group after that. So that's the problem, sometimes you'll see people 4 or 5 days after the scene, and that's not very healthy, but it can still help them, But it's very important to have a timely intervention. Otherwise, you'll sit with a lot of people that's got post-traumatic stress disorder. Provide opportunity for catharsis. Now, catharsis is the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from, stressful things or repressed emotions. You can do it through music. Music is a means of catharsis for them. If you play soft music, when they just sit there and meditate a little bit, and then provide opportunity to verbalize the trauma with those who have experienced it. So then that exercise I gave you some time back, it's facilitative listening skills and all of that would come to play here. Can you see everything is building up to the next step in chaplaincy? You should provide structure to them so that they will understand what's the next steps in their debriefing process, because sometimes it's not just a one shot and they're cured and they're better. You'll have to follow up with them. You'll have to make sure that they're secure and that there is structure in providing healing, and also provide support from the group and peers, and promote a follow-up if you can. All right, questions? Okay. That's fine. I don't mind not having a question. It means that you can go to bed after prayer. Well, I'm happy that everybody was here tonight, and I see some of you have experienced some troubles, with the logging in and so on. I'm sorry for your troubles about that. You'll have to just watch the video because there's some questions. Before I leave, the next segment in your workbook, and on page 76, you'll see legal basis for chaplaincy. If you're an American, you should study this. If you're not an American, doesn't apply to you. Okay, that's the legal basis for chaplaincy, Lemon versus Kurtzman. It's a very interesting court case, and if you will have time, just go through it. But you do not have any questions in there. And if I ask something in that paper, it's just for the sake of our American brothers who need to answer that correctly. But if you're not an American citizen, you can even answer it wrong, and I'll mark you still right. All right. If there's no question, we'll just leave. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we glorify you in this evening. We want to thank you for this lovely opportunity we had in class. Oh God, bless us. As we depart from this place, we want to depart with your blessing, Lord. We cannot do anything without your blessing. We want to ask you, Lord, that you will bless us in our endeavors. And whatever we plan to do with chaplaincy, Lord, that there will be a special anointing over us in us, with us, so that when we go with God in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, be blessed, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Cheers, guys. Ladies, bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.